In 2018, when I started my business, I literally wrote this in my journal. I said, I do not want to build a 7-figure agency. And lo and behold, 2 years later, I'm getting hacked for the 7-figure agency that I've built. And it was this very pivotal moment for me. Beyond the agency, I grew our company to 13 team members and really decent revenue, all of that. But it felt like a prison. Your deepest desires are revealed in the stuff that you could imagine doing every day for the rest of your life. And so the commitment it takes to create this life is so challenging because it requires us to turn down good opportunities to pursue the best opportunities.
To get someone from that place where they're stuck and they've kind of made a prison for themselves to getting white space in their calendar where they're doing the creative projects that they want to be doing. What are 2 or 3 big ideas that you've learned?
Yeah, the first thing would be
Today, I'm speaking with a coach that I paid $10,000 a month to work with. This isn't just any coach. Dan Bolton built a multiple 6-figure agency and then burnt it to the ground several times over. He's had an incredible journey from being a youth pastor to building multiple 7-figure businesses. And he's one of the most interesting people that I've ever had the privilege of meeting. Today, we talk about how to build a business that actually gives you the life that you want. We talk about how courage and faith play into the entrepreneurial journey, and we reveal the 2 to 3 things that you need to do if your business isn't serving you right now. This is one of the most value-packed episodes that I've recorded to date. If you enjoy it, please hit the subscribe button and share it with a friend. So 2019, you scale your agency to multiple 6 figures a month, and things are going well. COVID happens. And just as you get out of COVID, your Facebook account gets hacked.
Yeah, that's right. So for anyone who remembers that first season of COVID, right? It's obviously it was different in every country, but all of my friends who had normal jobs were basically on holiday, at their home and watching Netflix. And we were working online, and every kind of coach that was our niche that we were working with was freaking out because obviously they're some of them are working with brick and mortar businesses. And so I was working overtime during those first few months. And the business almost took a nosedive and didn't. And we worked really hard to retain clients. And so, I'd created this business that was lean and really profitable, and it felt good. It wasn't the perfect fit, but it felt like I was this is on the right track. And then about May or June of 2020, my email starts getting pinged from all of this ad spend that's happening really fast in client ad accounts. I'm oh, what's going on? I screenshot that and I send it to one of my team members. And he quickly discovers that we've been hacked. Because basically every client has their own ad accounts, and we were a Facebook ads agency, and us as the team had access to those things. And so basically a guy on our team, his Facebook account got hacked, and then that hacker got into every client ad account. And then he removed us and locked us out and locked the other guy out of his account. So we're literally watching this happen, and we can't do anything. We're sitting there, me and this friend in New Zealand, drinking a beer, just trying not to cry as we watch, because he basically ramped up. 2 things happened. He launched all these new campaigns for fake Calvin Klein underwear in Vietnam. And then he ramped up every ad account. I think it was just something $3,000 a day in ad spend. And so it was just insanity. And so it took a few days for those ad accounts to be shut down once we'd submitted this to support and things like that. And so over that 30 days between ad spend that we had to reimburse because Facebook didn't come to the party with almost any of it, we had to pause clients because they had the ad accounts shut down so we couldn't run their ads. And then clients just left because they were hey, understand it wasn't your fault. And also that sucked. It cost me about $100,000 cash.
Wow.
And it was one of those moments where the question I was asking myself was is this worth it? If this ever happened again, would it be something that I would consider, it's a worst case scenario, but it's simply the price of doing business. And it's one of those hard lessons, building this amazing business that I love. And one of the things I realized was I'm doing this for money, I think. Yeah, I enjoy the people I'm working with, but I've built a business that wasn't reflective of my goals. It wasn't reflective of my passions. In fact, in 2018, when I started my business, I literally wrote this in my journal. I said, I do not want to build a 7-figure agency. And this is like, I'm weeks into business. I don't know what a 7-figure agency is going to feel like. All I knew is that everything I'd seen didn't represent like who I was. And I wrote down, I don't want to run a 7-figure agency. I just want to like coach and create and shoot YouTube videos and do podcasts. And lo and behold, 2 years later, like I'm getting hacked for the 7-figure agency that I've built. And it was this very pivotal moment for me, right? We all have those moments in life where you almost like the record scratches and you're like, everything goes silent. And it was one of those just clear moments of like, however I'm living my life right now is not from my truest self. I was caught up in the hype of like, I'd scaled that agency really fast. And so that felt good. But then when it was just like me and the business, I was like, oh, something is off here. And so then that really catalyzed into kind of everything that I ended up doing over the next few years, which is coaching and consulting and really working with the people that I was working with on the done for you side, and then helping educate the people that either weren't the right fit for that done for you offer or couldn't afford it. And that was kind of what led to that next season, was basically getting absolutely raked for, $100K.
I think we've all had those moments, but there are also a lot of people right now who have got that feeling of this isn't quite right, but things are going well and they've got mouths to feed, they've got a team, maybe they've got other co-founders. What have you learned now when you look back that would help someone like that to change trajectory or do something about the fact that it just doesn't feel right?
You have to find this tension between the right and the wrong amount of delusion as an entrepreneur. When I started in business, I was completely delusional that it was going to work, and thankfully it did. I was delusional because I went through the webinars and went through the course, and the guy was telling me I could make money, and I literally just went through and just did everything that this guy Sam Ovens in this first course I went through told me to do. And I was delusional enough to believe him. Like, he was from New Zealand, I was from New Zealand. He grew up like 2.5 hours away from where I lived. So I was like, man, if he can do it, I can do it. And it worked really well. And I think all entrepreneurs have to have a level of delusion, a level of self-belief to overcome the inevitable obstacles. Where it doesn't serve us is the delusion that has us believing that the future is always going to be better than the present if we keep pushing on, right? We have a business we don't love, and we assume if we double it, we will love it. Like, I don't have time now, but I'm going to have way more time when I can hire all these people. And those things almost never work out the way that we anticipate them because we're so naive. We don't know what it's going to be like at 50,000 when we're at 20, right? Or when we're at 50 and we want to get to 100. And I think one of the biggest challenges for most people is they are unconsciously scaling and growing without any real vision or conviction as to why that is. And so in our kind of like the internet marketing space, there's this company called ClickFunnels, and they have the 2 Comma Club Award. And so I work with people and primarily help them scale to $1 million a year. But one of the first things I really try and understand is, why do you want to get to $1 million a year in the first place? Because your business might be amazing now and we can just tweak it and you can get some time back and you might love it. Doubling it, tripling it, whatever it might be, might not be the answer. And for most people, like, they come up short when you go, why do you want to get to the 1 million, the 50, whatever it might be? And most people just go, oh, because it'll be awesome. It sounds cool. And then I think Dean Graziosi teaches this whole idea of like the why question 7 layers deep. Why? And they come up with the answer and you say, and why is that? Right. And you keep going deeper. And one of the things I've realized for most people is they are unconsciously on autopilot. They've lost sight of why they're doing what they're doing. And the challenge is clarity and conviction never comes in motion. So it's not that you will find the clarity you're looking for if you just keep working and working and working. What I found is it only really ever comes in margin when you have the time and the space to really reflect on it. And for most entrepreneurs, that's like their worst nightmare, right? You like sit down and you be quiet and you really try and get clear on how things are going, how are you, where are you wanting to go, why are you wanting to go there. But that's the thing that keeps most people stuck, because there is so many paths to build a business. You can have a big team, you can have no team, you can scale with cold emails and cold outreach, you can build a content ecosystem, you can niche down, you can not niche down, you can charge premium, you can charge competitively and low priced. And the problem is that everything works. You can find examples of across the board in every industry, people that seem to ignore the most common advice and succeed anyway. People that become the Walmart of the industry while others become the Louis Vuitton. What we have to figure out is, what game are we trying to play? What are we optimizing for? And so one of the things I realize often when I work with entrepreneurs is that they are living out someone else's version of success, right? So they're taking advice from the single guy who has no kids and no life and lives somewhere like here in Dubai. And his idea of a good week is 70 hours at his computer, ripping Zoom calls all day and whatever else. But the problem is, you might be married and have kids and have completely different goals and have completely different life. But if you are taking advice from that person as if it's like, whatever they say goes, or if it works for them, it'll work for me, you end up building someone else's version of success. You end up scaling the wrong mountain, climbing up the wrong building with the ladder, whatever the analogy is. And I think that's where many entrepreneurs find themselves. And that's a terrifying place to be, because sometimes all we have is the evidence of what we don't have, not the clarity of what we want. So we go, okay, I don't want this. This feels horrible. And the worst part of that is, I don't know what I want anymore. It's been so long since I've asked myself that question and given myself the space and the margin to create that. Like, I think the gift of being a new entrepreneur is you have nothing to lose. You also know nothing, which means that you have a sense of clarity that many people do not have, because all of the options are on the table. But when you have a handful of clients paying all the bills, right? These fat retainers that now feel like you've got 10 bosses, 5 bosses, 3 bosses. You've now got a team worth of people that you need to keep paying to allow them to put food on the table. The world starts closing and the options start getting smaller and smaller. And so your ability to go, what do I want, gets really constrained down to, well, what do I have to do? What am I obligated to? And I think that's the really big challenge that I found myself in, is when beyond the agency, I grew our company to 13 team members and really decent revenue, all of that, a lot of clients, but it felt like a prison, right? I didn't feel free to like take a day off, let alone change the business model, because so many people were counting on me. But that is the secret to creating a really beautiful business and a really beautiful life, is having those hard conversations with yourself. Am I happy? Is this tracking in the way that I want it to? And I think this fundamentally comes from this idea that I have, that I think most entrepreneurs deep down want a business that fits around their life, not a life that has to fit around their business. And so if most people are honest, it's like they're not trying to IPO and become the best in their industry and become a billionaire. They want to make good money and not stress about the bills and vacation a few times a year and be able to put some money into savings, and work with amazing clients and have plenty of free time. White space in the calendar to be creative in the way they want to spend time with the people they want to. But that's not the reality for most people, because they feel stuck in the decisions they're living out from their past. They feel stuck with the lack of options they feel like they might have, and they feel stuck because they've kind of lost the sense of why. I got started because I want to do great work, and now I'm in it because I need to pay the bills.
So if you had to share 2 to 3 concepts to get someone from that place you just described, where they're stuck and they've kind of made a prison for themselves, to getting to the other island you just described, where they've got white space in their calendar, where they're doing the creative projects that they want to be doing, like, what are 2 or 3 big ideas that you've learned that have helped you and some of the people you work with to make that transition?
Yeah, the first thing would be insanely pragmatic. There's this marketer called Frank Kern. Yeah. And he did this talk that I've watched probably, 10, 15 times on YouTube. And it's like old school grainy, like 340p type vibe, 240. And I've watched it so many times because in it, he breaks down just this really simple idea that most of us have 2 identities. We have the core identity of who we really are under the surface. And then we have the shell identity of the life that we're living out. And you can see this to be true across all of our lives. You look at parents. The friction we have with parents is not because they're bad people. It's often because they've created a life for themselves not true to who they were, right? And so they are now trying to vicariously live through us. They want us to avoid the same mistakes, but it doesn't come across as a really loving thing. It comes across as control and manipulation. And, you look all around, there are very few people living out their calling, living out what they want to do. And his whole idea is that your core identity is really revealed in what you want to do every day. And when I heard that, I don't know if I believed it until I did kind of what he prescribed and actually lived it. And he basically said, like, your deepest desires are revealed in the stuff that you could imagine doing every day for the rest of your life. And so he kind of creates a scenario that's really silly. He's like, you've got to create this ideal day. And if you deviate it from it even one day, like, the world's going to blow up. So like you really take it seriously and you go, okay, what could I actually see myself doing every day? So he gets really specific where he's like, where would you want to wake up? Meaning like, what's the house like? Where do you live? What's the weather like? What's the first hour of your day spent doing? What are the first thoughts that you have in your mind? The feelings, the emotions you have? Are you having breakfast? Who are you having breakfast with? If you're working, what are you working on? What are the activities? What are the things that light you up? You having lunch? Who are you having lunch with? Where do your friendships fit? Where does exercise fit? And so on and so forth. The more I did this, the more it got really clear there was a gap between the life I was living, right, on Zoom calls all day, managing this team, doing work that was meaningful in that it impacted people, but not fulfilling because I felt like anyone could be doing what I was doing and I wasn't doing what only I could do. And then it created this vision of the life that I wanted. And I think sometimes the vision has to start with getting clear on what we don't want. And sometimes it's like, whatever is not this, like I just don't want to do this anymore. But then getting clear on like understanding a great life is just made up of a lot of great days. Like this idea of like, we're going to create an amazing life can feel so esoteric, so vague. It's like, we're going to become healthy. What does that mean? How does that look? And so that idea of getting clear on like, what is the type of life and what would be the day that would be reflective of that life that you could live every single day? And when I wrote that down, it was like it filled me with so much excitement. Firstly, I didn't know if it was possible, right? But it gave me something to work towards. The second thing was brutal because it requires tons of courage, which is, okay, what's everything that's not that amazing thing? And of course, it's not as easy as like you walk into the office and you go, right, guys, it's game over, we're done. If you've got the financial capacity to do that, it's amazing. You should probably do that. You don't need to drag it out. But most of us don't. And so I had to like really like iterate my way. And honestly, it took years to get to this point where now like I look on my calendar and I don't want to vomit. I love what I do. I love what I get to, the life I get to lead. But it requires courage because you were stepping into the unknown. And this is one of the things I find really interesting about humans is I think the statistic was something like, I might get the numbers wrong, but it was something like the average domestic abuse victim tries to leave their partner 11 or 12 times before they eventually do. If you've never like lived through domestic abuse, because I've had family members that have lived in that, it's hard to understand how anyone would ever live through it and ever tolerate it. It'd be like the first incident, you up and leave. But it speaks to this idea that most of us are more terrified of the unknown of the future than we are of the familiar present. Even if the familiar present is brutal, even if it's terrible, we know it. We know how to like work in this shit show of a business that we've created. And stepping into this unknown future, while there might be exciting factors, we also are realistic. It's like, well, what if it doesn't work? And what if I make less money? And what if I have to come back to this, but I've got to rebuild it all over again? It's really terrifying. And so for me, that was very practical. Like I had to let people go. I went from, in 2021, I had a team of 13. In 2022, I got down to a team of 4. And then in 2023, I then went down to a part-time virtual assistant. And it was like this constant peeling back of like, I was trying to like iterate 1% at a time until I eventually was like, I have to start from scratch to figure out like what this looks like for me to rebuild it. So I think the second thing is the courage. And the third thing is the commitment. You really have to figure out like, are you in this to unapologetically live the life that only you can live? Because on that journey of courage, you can have a compelling vision, excited, and oh my gosh, it's incredible, and have the mood board and the vision board about this life you're going to create in Dubai and LA and wherever you might be, right? I'm going to drive the car, or maybe it's like, I'm going to have 4 uninterrupted hours a day to live my life, whatever it might be. It requires such high commitment because you're going to have so many opportunities along the way to compromise on your standards. So you tell yourself, I'm only going to work with amazing clients. And then a terrible client waves like a credit card in your face. And you have this decision to make. Well, that money like looks really sexy right now. And maybe it's not going to be that bad. Or like you said you were only going to do a certain type of work, right? I'm only going to do like branding portfolios or whatever it might be. I don't even know that lingo. But then this person's like, can you build a website? And you're like, I mean, I can build a website, but do I want to?
Yeah.
And so the commitment it takes to create this life is so challenging because it requires us to turn down good opportunities to pursue the best opportunities. And it's very counterintuitive because most of us experience seasons of our life and maybe a big portion of our life in scarcity. Money was scarce, opportunities were scarce, clients were scarce. And so there's this terrifying idea of like the wrong client comes along and they say like, let's work together. Well, what if a good client doesn't come along? It requires so much like courage and faith and trust. And I think that is something that I know for myself, that I was like literally by the pool before, because I'm in Dubai here. I've had an event the last couple of days and I'm flying to New Zealand tomorrow. And I was writing down some of my rules for life. And one of the things I wrote down was, if I wouldn't do it for free, I shouldn't do it. Now that's a nice to have in this season of life, but I think everyone needs to create those commitments and those standards. Yeah. You will never drift into the best life. You will never drift into the most authentic version of yourself. You'll never drift into a profitable, fun business model where clients are getting amazing results. You have to consciously choose it and then fight for it. And so you will never create that business by default. It will only happen by design. And the design is not on day one where you create your business plan and your pitch deck and whatever else. It is in the trenches every day when you are faced with decisions and opportunities that are less than. And if you keep settling for the less than opportunities, you will build a life in business of mediocrity.
Yeah.
It's only in saying no to the things that look amazing, that could help financially right now, to create and hold those standards to create that business that you want.
Yeah. Courage and commitment. I love that. Yeah. I often say to my clients, is the decision that you're making today in alignment with what you want? Because people, they say they want this thing. And then like you said, something comes along where they've got a decision to make. Like, I want these kind of clients. And this kind of client comes along and they go, well, I'll just work with them for now because, and I was like, no, every time you say yes to this, you are changing your course literally in that moment. You are changing the trajectory of where you're going. Talk to me about the link between faith and courage for you personally.
Well, I think what you just spoke to there is really interesting because we can lie to ourselves and say like, this isn't that big of a deal. Like, I'm lowering my standard in this moment. But what it does is it erodes our belief in ourselves. And that's what's more important. Is it's not important that this person's waving money in our face and maybe it really is a 2-week project and you go, hey, it's not ideal, but I'm going to do it. And in 2 weeks, life's going to go back to what it was. What you're telling yourself is that what I really want is not actually what I want. And that any opportunity I get to compromise on it, I will.
Or it's not available to me.
Yeah, oh, exactly. It's that scarcity mindset. And you know, one of the most abundant things you can do is turn down money, right? Which sounds very counterintuitive. Abundance comes from the idea that not all money is meant for you. And when you can really tap into that, you tap into this trust, going to this faith conversation. Everyone has to understand or come to a worldview to articulate the universe they believe they live in, right? So that sounds really big, but I'll break it down. Doesn't matter whether you are agnostic, atheist, whether you believe in God, whether you're a meditator, whatever it might be. We all are living in like this reality and we all experience different versions of reality, but like we're here and there's gravity and there's, you know, food and sunlight and water and there's all these laws that we live within. We have to figure out like, is the universe conspiring for our success or is it going against us? Is there constantly resistance where like becoming successful or becoming the best version of ourselves is this uphill battle because everything is always working against us? Or is everything always working in our favor? And maybe the truth is in between, but what we believe about life and what we put our faith in really determines like how much commitment we are able to bring to the table. If you walk into a gym and you believe that no matter how hard you work out in that gym, your body will never change because your hormones are screwed and your thyroid and your, you know, all of your family is overweight and you're big boned and whatever else. If all those narratives come in, you're probably not going to get any results. You will not show up in any way to the degree that you need to. It sounds so simple, but like all of our life is made up of these kind of internal stories that we tell ourselves. They could feel really true, right? You could have had a brutal upbringing. You could have had all of the things that are now obstacles that are making you start short of where you wish. But the reality is that like what you believe about those things, whether they happen to you or you believe they happened for you, right? Whether those things are there to make you a worse person, that make it harder, or whether they're there to make you better and sharpen you and all of that, that all creates a narrative that will strengthen your faith in where you think you're going to be able to go and whether it's possible for you or not. And I think ultimately many people love to set big goals, and really have no intention of ever getting there because they don't have the faith that supports that they can actually create that. And so you have like, you know, what's the saying? It's like everyone that heads to Olympics believes they're a gold medal winner, right? But obviously not everyone is. And so when you sit down with yourself and you have an honest conversation, to become a gold medal winner, you have to believe that you're going to do it first and foremost. No one's going to accidentally get there. But the second thing is you have to have the level of commitment that then is going to reinforce that. Now, commitment again I don't think it's just reflective of work ethic. There are some of the poorest people on the planet have the strongest work ethics on the planet. There's more to it than that. It comes back to this conversation of standards and commitments and how we live our life and what we say yes and no to. But it all comes from whether or not we have the faith that that life that we dream of is actually meant for us or not. Is it possible? And that's why the coaching and consulting and mentorship industry is so key, because it breaks your version of reality. Like when I started in business in 2018, at my peak, so quick backstory, I was, youth pastor from 18 to 28, worked a ton, built some skills, and at my peak, I was making like 30,000 US a year, working insane hours. And when I started in business, got to six figures really fast. And I thought I was hot shit. I was like, man, I went from 30 grand a month, six figures is incredible. 30 grand a year to six figures a year. And then I joined a coaching program and there were people making six figures in like a weekend. And I remember that breaking my brain in a really positive way, where they were showing me what was possible for me. And I think that's why it's so important to like audit our environments and audit the people we spend time with, because it either creates a sense of faith of a different future possibility for us, or you completely believe that everyone who's experiencing that is unethical, doing it all for the wrong reasons, and that you're really self-righteous, being poor and broke and unhappy because all the other people are doing it, in a wrong way. And I'm bringing this up because we were talking about the UK before, and New Zealand is very similar. Like I got a hit piece written on me earlier this year, and the hit piece was former pastor used to teach kids about Jesus and now worships money. And I read that headline. Firstly, I'll just walk you through real quickly. I was like 3 a.m. and I started getting all these messages and I couldn't sleep. And it was unrelated. Couldn't sleep. Started getting all these messages and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I checked the front page online of the kind of biggest newspaper news site in our country, and I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And I read it through it, and it was really funny. It was really poorly written. I didn't really understand like anything that was being implied. It was basically just a bunch of Facebook posts that I had written, and I read through it and I agreed with all of it. I was like, yeah, totally. I said this and I said this. But why I bring this up is because initially I felt like so much energy. I felt like really nervous, and I don't even know. It was just like the attention was really intense. But I had so much empathy because I dropped out of high school at 16. I was a youth pastor for 9 years. I've never been to secondary, never been to university or college. And then I step into business and it looks like I'm just making all this money and it's no effort and all of that. And then there are people, the majority of the world, that work really, really, really hard to go through the traditional path. And so this guy's making, 70 grand a year as a reporter. And over here, there's this guy who's apparently making millions, working hardly at all. And we're from the same city. And I think that's one of the most important journeys that every entrepreneur has to take, is whether it is geographically or digitally changing their environment. Who am I taking cues from? It's the whole idea of the average of the 5 people, right? And Hormozy said recently, it's like not the 5 people you're with, but the 5 people you compare yourself to the most, right? So there's a digital element to there as well. But the point is that the faith and commitment element can only exist in a way to serve you if where you're getting your faith from actually stretches what's possible for you. Because most people's faith is in, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, eventually I might feel better, or I might get the promotion, or I might whatever, but it's this traditional mindset. And I think most people need to tap into what I said at the start, which is that right level of delusion of really believing that you can create a wildly different version of your life that maybe no one in your hometown has ever seen, a version of a business that is not the industry norm. And until you tap into that faith, you will never create it. It has to exist first here before it'll ever exist in the world.
Yeah. And so many people don't get that. I have so many conversations with creatives where they're convinced that they have to get X, Y, and Z first before doing anything else, whether it's investing in coaching or hiring the right team or whatever. Like, you've got a lot of experience coaching and coaching coaches and being with coaches. What are some of the ways that people start to shift that? What are some of the things that you've seen give people that aha moment where they're like, this has to shift internally first, and then the things externally will start to happen?
The brutal part of that is like, it's almost never through hearing it. You got to live it. Right. And I mean that in the sense of like, I remember hearing for years from people who had been burned out, giving all of the warning signs and all of the like, don't do this and don't do this. Burnout is honestly the worst. And I was like, yeah, totally. And then I went and did my own journey and then got wickedly burned out. Hormones, absolute mess. Felt like, the way I describe it is when that season really happened, end of 2021, it was like my whole body was on low battery mode. But I'd heard all of that. Like, people had told me, right? And the problem is that sometimes things can only come to us, not always, but many times only come to us through lived experience. And so when we hear someone like a Tony Robbins say like success is 80% psychology, 20% strategy, you don't believe it until you've lived it. You might go, that's really interesting. And then you look for the funnel and the hack and the pricing structure and whatever else. And you think about everything from an external factor. Like, you are a rare person if you know that the thing that's holding you back between where you are and where you want to be is internal work. But the reality is, I've just crossed over working with 1,100 clients over the last few years and done thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of coaching. The internal game is basically the only game there is. Like, the strategy part is so simple. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy because you still have to find the right strategy. Like, when I first started in business, I had no strategy. So it was literally everything for everyone. You need a website, I would do it. I managed the social media for a grocery store. I was running Facebook ads for a vehicle financing place. No strategy. So it wasn't until I actually like really learned about marketing and offers did things start to click. But once you know that, the temptation is like, if it's not working, you go, it's the strategy. The problem is like, I coach people and I can give people the exact same strategy, and one person makes millions and the other person doesn't get any traction at all. So it's like, is it me and the strategy, or is it them, or is it a mix? And the reality is that you have to have a good strategy. Strategy matters. But like, I'll give you an example. Everyone in your audience will have to have sales conversations. And so different people have different temperaments, and some people love the scripts and and the tonality, and they're saying all the right things in the right way. But you can have all of that. And if you're approaching the sales conversation with desperation and scarcity, and internally the story is, I need this to work, and if this person doesn't say yes, I'm screwed, right? We already know intuitively that there's a really high percentage that person's going to say no, because energetically you're going to come across with like what in the sales world we call commission breath, right? Where it's like the person that's looking at the car doesn't feel like you care about which car they get. You care about how much money you're going to make on whatever transaction it is. And so we can see how like the internal game and your beliefs and your emotions and all of that affect things like that. But one of the things that was really interesting for me was I was sitting with someone this week, and he confirmed something that I've experienced in my life. This was someone who has exited his company for multiple seven figures last year. He now is completely independently wealthy, owns 10 properties, no debt, has about $40,000 cash coming in passively through there, and then it makes multiple six figures a month in profit. And he said to me, I passed on something to me that his mentor said to him. He said, the moment you no longer need money is when you will make the most money, right? And what was really interesting for me is I started a YouTube channel at the start of last year. I told myself I was going to do it for years. I kept putting it off. And when I started it, I had no business strategy behind it. Literally the intent was, I'm going to enjoy it because it's going to clarify my thinking, and I'm going to try and help people with like really actionable advice. And so my channel is still tiny to this day, right? 4,000-ish subscribers. Each video gets a couple of thousand views, but that has probably pulled in about 1 to 1.5 million in profit in the last 18 months. And the feedback that I get from people is really hard to pinpoint in terms of a strategy. Because I literally just turn the camera on and talk, and there's not like there's no call to action. None of my videos say like, click here, do literally nothing. But people will say like, there's something different about your energy. Or like, I feel like you really don't need me to work with you, which is why I want to work with you. And where most people can misunderstand what I'm saying is you need to then get to the point where you have so much money in your bank or you're making so much money that you can then go, I don't need. But what I'm saying is you can decide to do that now by simply not looking at someone as just a bunch of potential revenue, but enter into every conversation, enter into every piece of marketing with just the intent that if I show up in the right way, I add value, I create a funnel that, helps people go from cold to, warm to hot. And I simply help people take the right next step for them. My job is to help them make the right best decision for their business, their life, whatever it is. And I'm detached from the outcome. You will make more money. And so finding this relationship between inner game and strategy is really challenging until you start to observe how that might show up for you. And so one of the things that I'd challenge everyone to think about is what energy and intent and beliefs have they been bringing into, let's say, client acquisition recently. And that's basically all the cues you need sometimes, where it's like, if people are saying to themselves like, oh, no one in my market wants to pay this amount of money, or like you might be trying to build a team, it's like, there's no good people out there. The only thing you need to do to confirm that you are believing a lie is to look at someone else who is proving you wrong. And in every industry, there is someone who's going to be charging more than you, have a better team, have a worse brand, and somehow they're attracting the best talent. And so that's the quickest way to go, okay, I'm believing something here that not only is not serving me, it's not true, it's not rooted in reality. And so the only way to rewire this and the only way to really recalibrate your internal world is to just start observing it. It's not like, okay, I'm just going to think positively and believe positive things and everything is going to work out. You have to dismantle your internal world block by block. Where is this belief coming from? Why do I have this? And then you start to rebuild it. And when you rebuild it with empowering beliefs. Life is happening for me, not to me. Getting clients is easy because people love getting help, right? There is no lack of people who want the solutions to the problems that want solutions to the problems they're facing with the solutions that I have, right? And when you really recalibrate the internal world, you start to see a massive shift. And again, it's only an experience. I can sit here and say like, it's worked for me, and people go, cool, nice for you. So it's the challenge of like, are people willing to go on that journey of actually trusting, having faith, and really doing this in the right way? And there's no lack of proof in the world of people that are at the top of their game. Like, the guy I was telling you about who's independently wealthy, he has 2 mindset coaches, right? Like when you work with people who are ultra successful, they spend so much time working on the inner game. But us as entrepreneurs, we can often just neglect it altogether, right? Or overemphasize it in the wrong way where we think inner game is motivation. We're binging the 17th podcast this week and we're running while we're still poor. And it's because we're not doing anything with what we're learning. And we also don't need motivation. We need like new beliefs. Or does that make sense?
Yeah, like we need someone to help us with that internal shift rather than like consuming more content or whatever, basically. Yeah. Talk to me about money. Like a very direct question, but how much money have you made like total in the last 3 or 4 years, would you say?
I can probably break it down year by year. I think in 2018, when I first started, I might have done 200K. Mm-hmm. In 2019, I did 400K. In 2020, I did 1.2 million. Mm-hmm. 2021 did 2 million. 2022 did 2 million again. And that was a really interesting time because I let go of all the team, 14 down to a team of 4, and still made the same money. Mm-hmm. Last year, I think I might have done 1.6, 1.7, but now it was just me and a VA. Mm-hmm. And this year, probably on track for the same. And so like where the shift has really happened in the last few years is like really focusing on cash collected and just revenue to profit. And so last year I might have done 1.1 million in profit. This year I'm on track for 1.6 or 1.7 million in profit. And so while my revenue has actually shrunk in the last few years, the profit has gone up. Mm-hmm. And that's really where the focus has been.
One of the reasons I decided to work with you was because you had that creative side to you. I just want to open up a conversation about money and creativity because it's interesting when I hear you talk about certain concepts, and I'm thinking the conversations that I have with creatives are often the opposite of that. People often come to me and say, I'm not doing this for the money. And like, I don't need to be a multimillionaire. I just want X, Y, and Z. But often they miss the impact that money can really have on the things that they want. So I'll give you a tangible example. I worked with a guy who was a filmmaker, and he really wanted to make this documentary about the Cyprus conflict where he grew up. And part of the work that I did with him was getting him to understand that that was never really going to happen unless he made money or raised the funds in somehow to make that happen. And so in your experience, what is the biggest thing that blocks creatives or just people in general around having more money? And why do you think they're so adverse to it?
It's really interesting because I can deeply resonate with the not doing it for the money because I was a youth pastor. And so like, dude, I know we hear stories of like these rich pastors, but I don't know any. Like I know they exist, but that was not us. And so that was deep in me, that whole like mission, calling, purpose, feeling like I want to leave an impact on the world and money is neither here nor there. And so I always had the goal of not being broke, but I never had the goal of being rich, which is very different, right? So when I started in business, I left all of that kind of purpose stuff behind. And I was like, dude, the goal is just not being broke anymore and being able to fly like economy, you know, which at the time I was like, I just couldn't afford any flights. I was like, just being able to afford a flight anywhere would be amazing. And then I wanted to be able to go to cafes and actually buy stuff without looking at the price, because I wasn't spending a lot, but it was literally be like, I would look and be like, can I afford breakfast? No, I can't, you know? So I wanted to get to that place. And then embarrassing, but true. The third one was I wanted to buy Calvin Klein undies. And so that was my level of financial vision when I created my business. It was not like buy a Lambo, move to, you know, wherever. I was literally like, I just want to be like just above broke. And so that's exactly what I made. I made just above broke, right? And so I made good money, but it would fall through my fingers, right? I'd either give it away or spend it. There was no wealth accumulation for the first few years of my business, even as my income grew, my lifestyle grew, our generosity grew, and there was kind of no savings. And I think one of the challenging pieces for most people is we've had the wrong money models in our life when it comes to the like role models and the people that like, it's very rare. They exist, but it's rare to find people that you would trade your life with who are really rich. Like typically the only thing they have going for them is their money. And then their marriage is falling apart or their health is terrible or they don't see their kids. And if that's not true of everyone, it's at least the narrative that most of us believe. And so then we have this really odd relationship where we feel like more money equals more pain. And then you make money or you hear people who win lotto and then like everyone turns against them and starts asking for money. And so like we have all these beliefs that actually hold us back because the picture of like wanting money sounds pretty terrible, right? In a lot of ways, it's a lot of responsibility, it's a lot of stress. And the second thing would be is that most people think they have to choose between one or the other.
Yes.
I want to have creative control and purpose and do meaningful work, or I'm in it for the money. And I think about it like I'm deeply in it for the money as a byproduct, not the end. Right. So I'll give you an example. When I was in 2019, like a side quest that I did for a few months was I kind of started this course to help people start agencies, because all these people that I knew and loved from my hometown were like, you're making money online right now. You were a youth pastor. How did you do it? So I started this course and I was charging $1,000 for it. And, you know, I had people joining every single day, but then there were people that I knew and loved that couldn't afford it. So I was like, right, I'm just going to give these people access. And so I maybe did that for 4 or 5 people. And you can observe like whether people log in and, you know, do the thing. And so of the 5 people that I granted access to and basically gifted $5,000 away, right? Almost no one logged in. And of the people that logged in, no one got results. It was a really important piece of the puzzle to me of going like, we need to prioritize making money for the sake of what we're selling. If we do not value what we're selling with a price tag, then people will not value it in the transaction, whether you are trying to get someone results in a gym as a personal trainer. The likelihood of someone showing up at 5 a.m. and doing your boot camp and they've paid no money, you know, they, as we know, have no skin in the game. And so money became this thing where it was like, not only did I want more of it to achieve my goals and not only increase my standard of living, but be generous, I saw it as this beautiful, necessary part of the journey that the more impact I wanted to have in this vehicle of business, the more I had to charge and naturally the byproduct, the more I was going to make. And what's been really interesting is I have seen the impact that I've been able to have with people grow in proportion to the amount of money I've been able to make. both in the volume of people I worked with and the amount of people that have actually invested in themselves. Because it's not even about me. It's not about you paying me and then going, I'm on the hook. That can be a part of it. It's oftentimes people paying enough money to where they really feel like this is a line in the sand moment for them. And so I was hearing the other day about this girl who's a hypnotist, and she charges $1 million a year for like one client. And so for most of us, it's unfathomable. Why would you do that? That's overcharging. But she works with billionaires. So in order to get a billionaire to care about the work that you're going to do with them at a deep level, you cannot charge $1,000. It would be impossible to get them to care. You have to have them create skin in the game. And so money for me is this really beautiful, neutral thing. It's not good or bad. It can be used for good or bad. And my relationship with it is not the master of my life, right? It is a great servant. It's a terrible master. But it is necessary for me to create the life that I want and to take care of the people that I want. It's also necessary for me to collect from the people who want to be impacted by my work. And when I started to see it through that lens, it became realizing I can be a terrible person with money or an amazing person with money. That's down to who I am before the money, not after the money. So I no longer was afraid of it. But then I started to see it as like this beautiful piece, this beautiful puzzle to the journey, where it wasn't this necessary evil, this thing that I had to like be ashamed of or be embarrassed of when I was asking like, this is the price from someone. It was this co-creation of like, when people come on board, they get the investment of I'm in, and then they get to hold themselves accountable through that process. You get compensated, and now you create this equal exchange. And most people create businesses where we think it has to be a win-lose, right? That's how business is presented to most of us, right? It's like either you do a ton of work for the client and they feel really looked after and you feel like you've been chewed out, or the client has to overpay for a logo, right? They're paying 50 grand for a logo that took you 15 minutes on, whatever. And so you kind of feel like you've maybe taken advantage of it or whatever. And the reality is that like great business is built off the fair exchange of a win-win. And that sounds so elementary, but when people can understand that people need to pay and that it is your moral obligation to charge the prices that reflect your value, it's your moral obligation so that person actually cares and that person is invested, your relationship with money will change, where it's no longer about it being amazing and your best friend or your enemy. It's about going like, this is a necessary part of life. And I'll just quickly go back to this because this is a really important idea. Money as we know it is completely made up, right? So the history of money is like, obviously there was trade, and trade was you have a goat and I have some wheat. And if I want your goat and you want some wheat, we can create a trade of equal value, right? I give you enough wheat, you give me a goat, fantastic. Then the problem obviously was if you have a goat and I have wheat, but you want eggs, right? How does that work? And so obviously we have gold, and then we have different coins and pearls and different civilizations, but basically things of real value that represented value, not just the exchange of a goat and wheat. And then you had cash backed by gold, and then you have fiat currency, which is like completely made up, right? And then you have like digital currencies. Why this is important is because money is most easily understood if you go all the way back, right? We are trying to take two things that we care about and we're trying to exchange them in such a way that both of our lives become enriched, that we both get what we need, that we both get what we're looking for. And so this model of like you get rich by taking advantage of people, by manipulating people might be true for some people, but for us, we create wealth for ourselves and we create value for others. And the more committed we become to creating more value for more people and value of a higher quality, the more money we're going to make. And it sounds so simplistic, but that was a big unlock for me where I was like, wealth is just a representation of the value that I'm creating in the world. And if we don't have a lot of money, we might be undervaluing the value we're bringing. We might be undercharging for it. But in some way, it's indicative that we're not having the impact we want to be having, right? We look at a Mother Teresa, and that's a really deceiving argument because you can look at people that have massive, massive impact and no money, but you have to understand the amount of money she was able to attract and raise for the causes, right? So even on like the kind of religious, like, that level, you attract money wherever you create value. Money flows to value. And so when you see that money as an indicator of that it is not good or bad, it is a reflection of the value that you're creating in your world. The question you then have to ask is, am I creating enough value for the right people? And am I really showing up in the way that I want to be? Not chasing money, understanding it's a byproduct, but of the value that you're going to create. So I'm seeing your role as a value creator first, as opposed to an entrepreneur, money chasing, money hungry human being.
And if people constantly get the objection around that's too much money or whatever, does it mean that I'm not creating enough value, or does it mean that I need to get better at communicating that value?
That's a great question. So obviously it's not black and white. You could be trying to sell Louis Vuitton to someone who's living in the slums, and it has nothing to do with the value they have, other than that value doesn't have the utility for them than it would for someone else. So how I think about it is there's value reality and there's value perception. The worst part of entrepreneurship is when you're really good at what you do and you can't communicate that. So the only people that know you're amazing were the people that gambled on you to pay you. And now you can't figure out how to translate that. And in our industry, that's so common, where it's like, whether or not it's true, there are people who believe that they're the best kept secret and I'm amazing at what I do and clients get amazing results and I can't seem to get more clients. And so we have to firstly be committed to our craft to such a degree that we actually are really good at what we do. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen from reading a book or going through a course, but you can fake confidence. You can't fake mastery. So really committing to whatever it is we're doing, I'm going to try and be incredible at it. Now, you might not want to do everything it takes to become the gold medalist, but do you want to be in that realm of people who are recognized as good in that field? If so, and you want to make great money, that's what it's going to take. So you got to figure out your level of commitment in the game that you want to play. But then you have to figure out the perception piece. And so what's valuable for someone else is not valuable for everyone. And so you might have an amazing offer, product, service, but you then need to figure out, firstly, who am I trying to communicate this to? And then how would I communicate this in such a way that that right person who I know this is a good fit for would be able to see that what I have is the solution to the problem that they're facing. And so how I think about it is, obviously the supplement industry is a huge industry and being a vitamin can be really profitable. But for most businesses, you at least want to start out with the idea of being a painkiller, not a vitamin. You don't want everything you're presenting to be perceived by the person you're trying to work with as a nice to have. Cool, let's circle back in 3 months and see kind of where timelines line up and blah, blah. And I'd imagine that'd be where a lot of the creative industry finds themselves. Like the person's website or their portfolio or their branding or their socials or their logo might be good enough for them. There's not a high level of pain until it's like, well, let's see like the end of the financial year, And so you then need to figure out, either you're not providing enough value and you're solving problems that don't exist, or are you not really communicating the value of a really compelling brand? The way that changes that business's perception in the market, the way that will help them attract in their businesses higher level clients, retain them for longer, whatever it might be. And that communication of the value perception is one of the best skill sets you could possibly master, because it's not enough to just be good at your craft and have no way of communicating it. And I think that's where creatives, I think that's where, like, in this age of even TikTok with musicianship, yes, you can create a song and upload it to TikTok and go viral. But one of the things that I see more commonly is the people that actually go viral did a lot of work. And like there's one artist that I followed a few weeks ago, and I found him on Instagram Reels, and he created this really hilarious trend, and the backing of the trend was one of his songs. And so he figured out all of these different ways to use his songs and reels that would go viral, that then made his song go viral on Spotify. But if he had just created the song and gone, I'm going to hope for the best, right? That may have gotten traction, but then he created how do I get people to know about it? And I think the challenge for a lot of artists is they just want to do the work. And the problem is no one's going to know how good you are, and no one's going to know how to pay you and find you and all of that. So it's understanding that everyone is in marketing. Everyone is in sales. Now, if you get really, really, really good at what you do, hopefully you don't have to do that much marketing and sales. Like Naval Ravikant says it like this: we market because our products isn't very good, and we sell because our marketing isn't very good. And I think about that a lot. And so everyone has to understand this like reality and perception game of, firstly, do I have something worth selling? And secondly, do people see the value in it for them?
Love it, man. Dude, this conversation has been so powerful. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find out more about you or connect with you?
Instagram, at Bolton, Bolton.
Yeah.
Come say hi. Click on a link in the bio. There's YouTube videos and goodness there.
And photos of chickens and
Photos of chickens.
Bali life.
Yeah, 100%.
Nice one, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks, dude.